Welcome back to bmaster79. In this video we are working through ielts speaking part 2 and part 3. Topic 59. Describe an impressive conversation you had that you remember well. You will see the full 1-minute brainstorm, a complete part 2 long turn, and model answers for every part 3 question. 4 things before we start so that nothing here is oversold. First, band 9 on this channel means our own assessment of the answer against the public ielts band descriptors. It is not a certified examiner score. Second, the candidate, is invented, and so is the story. Third, you should copy the technique and the phrases, not the content, because a memorized story is audible. And fourth, the answers here are read by a synthetic voice, so pronunciation, which is one of the 4 marking criteria, is simply not demonstrated in this video. Here is the card, reproduced word for word. Describe an impressive conversation you had that you remember well. You should say who you talked to, when and where you had it, what you talked about, and explain why you think it was impressive. Underneath are the part 3 questions printed on the same card. One note on the source, because we do not quietly edit these cards. The card shows 2 part 3 questions and appears to end there. Both are answered exactly as written. We have added 2 further part 3 questions for extra practice, and those 2 are clearly labeled as additions when they appear. You get 1 minute and a pencil. Here is how to spend it. Do not write sentences. 8 to 10 keywords is the whole note. Choose a real memory that contains 1 quotable line. A line you can repeat gives you something fluent to build towards. Spend most of the minute on the last prompt. Why is where the best language lives. The first 3 prompts are just scaffolding. Decide your final sentence now, so you finish rather than trail off. Aim for about 2 minutes. Being stopped by the examiner is normal and costs you nothing. These are the actual notes. 12 fragments, no sentences. Notice how little is written for the first 3 prompts, and how the 4th prompt carries the ideas that will earn the marks. These are the phrases the answer will deploy. Learn them as whole chunks with their meanings, and they will transfer to dozens of other cue cards. It started a small talk, the low-stakes opening of a conversation that opened the floodgates. 1 remark released everything that followed out of some noble calling for high-minded reasons used here. Ironically, what struck me was Flag's the most important idea. By's thinking time. She was thinking out loud and polished, unrehearsed speech to be spoken to as an equal, treated as an adult, not a child. It stayed with me. The effects outlasted the moment, agonizing over a decision, deliberating painfully. And this is the shape of the 2 minutes. The quoted line lands at around 1 minute 15, and everything after it explains why it mattered. Here is the full long turn. The text is on screen so you can follow the grammar as you listen.
I would like to talk about a conversation I had with my aunt, who has spent almost her whole working life as a nurse in a provincial hospital. We have always got on well, but we have never really talked about anything serious before that night. It happened about 2 years ago, during the Tet holiday. Everyone else had drifted off to bed, and the 2 of us ended up sitting out on the balcony of my grandmother's house with a pot of tea. We stayed there until well past midnight. It started a small talker. She asked how university was going, and I admitted that I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and that opened the floodgates. She told me she had not chosen nursing out of some noble calling. She chose it because it was the cheapest course available to her at the time.
What struck me was how honest she was about the years she spent resenting that decision.
And about the moment she stopped waiting to feel passionate and simply started getting good at the job. She said something I have never forgotten. That meaning tends to arrive after competence, not before it. The reason it stayed with me is partly that it contradicted every piece of advice I was getting elsewhere, which was all about following your passion. But it is also the way she said it. She was not lecturing me. She was thinking out loud, and she allowed herself to sound uncertain,
Which is rare among the adults in my family.
for the first time. I felt I was being spoken to as an equal. Looking back at it, I would say that conversation quietly changed the way I make decisions. Whenever I am agonizing over something now, I hear her telling me to stop auditioning for life and simply start doing the work.
Those numbers are measured from the audio you just heard, not claimed in advance. The long turn came to 315 words, delivered in 2 minutes and 2 seconds, which is about 155 words a minute. That is a comfortable, natural pace. Note that it runs slightly past 2 minutes, so in a real test the examiner would almost certainly stop you in the final sentence. That costs you nothing, and it is worth knowing that this answer is a little long rather than pretending otherwise. Now, why does this answer sit at the top of the scale? Take the 4 criteria one at a time. Fluency and coherence. The turn runs for 2 minutes without repair or hesitation, and it is sequenced by meaning rather than by the 4 printed prompts. Markers such as "what struck me was" and "looking back" signal structure without sounding rehearsed. Lexical resource. Idiom is used where it fits and nowhere else. Open the floodgates out of some noble calling. Stop auditioning for a life. Note the precision of collocation. Years spent resenting a decision drifted off to bed. Grammatical range and accuracy. Past perfect for backstory we had never really talked. A cleft sentence. What struck me was how honest she was. Non-defining relative clauses and controlled hedging meaning tends to arrive. Pronunciation. Not demonstrated. This answer is read by a synthetic voice, so the 4th criterion cannot honestly be shown here. Record yourself and assess this one against the public descriptors. Part 3 is a discussion. The examiner is no longer interested in your story. They want to know how well you can handle an abstract question. Part 3 is a discussion, not a story. Personal anecdote is evidence here, not the answer. Answer the question in your first clause, then develop. Do not warm up. 30 to 60 seconds per answer. 2 developed ideas beat 5 listed ones. You are allowed to disagree with the question's premise. Doing it politely is high-level language in itself. What topics do young people like to talk about? Do not produce a list. Segment the group with close friends, with family, in public. Name something that has changed. Comparison across time gives you tenses to demonstrate. One concrete example outweighs 3 abstractions.
It depends enormously on who they are with us. I think among close friends the staples are still relationships, money, worries, and whatever they happen to be watching.
Although watching now tends to mean short videos rather than television. What has genuinely shifted there is that a lot of young people are far more willing to discuss things that used to be off limits. Mental health, burnout, whether a degree is actually worth what it costs. Politics comes up less directly and usually arrives through something else, like housing or job security. And a surprising proportion of the conversation is simply shared internet references, which can be almost impenetrable if you are outside the age group.
Is it important to have good communication skills at work? Commit in the first clause, then qualify. Fence sitting reads as weakness. Draw a distinction. Communication is not the same as being talkative is the kind of move that separates Band 8 from Band 9. Anchor it in a consequence somebody could actually observe at work.
Absolutely. And I would go further. It largely decides how far a person's technical ability actually travels. You can be the most competent engineer in the building. What if you cannot explain a trade-off to someone non-technical? Your good judgment never leaves your own head. I would draw a distinction there between communicating well and simply being talkative. The parts that matter are quite unglamorous. Writing an email that does not need a follow-up, listening properly before you disagree, knowing when to escalate something and when to just get on with it. And in flat earth, more collaborative workplaces, this matters more than it used to, because far fewer decisions are handed down and far more of them get argued out in a room.
The next two questions are not on the source card. We have written them for extra practice, and they are marked as additions on each slide. How has technology changed the way people communicate? Concede before you argue. Enormously. Those shows control. Name the gain and the loss. Balance is a banned descriptor in practice. Reach for an abstraction the examiner has not heard 40 times today.
Enormously.
Although I would argue the change is more about pace and permanence than about substance. We communicate almost constantly now, but in much smaller units. And nearly everything is recorded, which makes people more guarded than they ever were on the telephone. The obvious gain is reach. I can keep up with a friend on the other side of the world for nothing, which would have been unthinkable for my parents. The loss, I think, is that so much interaction has become asynchronous that we have lost the message,
Overlapping quality of real conversation.
and a great deal of the meaning used to live in exactly that mess.
Do you think people are losing the ability to have deep conversations? Challenge the premise politely. I am slightly skeptical of that. Grant the strongest version of the opposing case before you refuse it. Reframe in your final sentence. A reframe is a memorable ending.
I'm slightly skeptical of that, to be honest. Every generation seems convinced the next one has stopped talking properly, and that has been true since long before anyone had a phone. What I would accept is that the conditions for a deep conversation have become much harder to come by. We are rarely bored and rarely undistracted. And a phone face up on the table is enough on its own to keep a conversation shallow. But when people are actually given the space, a long train journey, a power cut, a late night after a family meal, they still go deep remarkably quickly. So I would call it an underused ability rather than a lost one.
To summarize, 5 things worth taking away. Pick a memory with one quotable line in it, and build the whole turn towards that line. Give the fourth prompt why roughly half of your 2 minutes. In part 3, commit in your first clause. then qualify. Draw a distinction somewhere. You may disagree with the question. Politely challenging a premise is high-level language. Copy the structure and the phrases. Do not copy the story. An examiner can hear a memorized answer immediately. That is topic 59. Record your own version of the part 2 answer, time it, and compare it against the structure slide rather than against the words. If this helped, subscribe for the rest of the part 2 and part 3 series. Good luck with your test.